Level 2 of Charm takes place in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the childhood home of both Felicity and her mother Victoria. The story continues when Felicity shockingly emerges outside the walls of Old San Juan.
Oh, no, no, no,
Now that
no,
players have
not here.
sufficiently trained with their
Mom,
abilities,
they're
the
here.
challenge is quite literally elevated. I intentionally designed Level 2 to stand out in the sense that it has increased verticality and it's warm and inviting, yet poses a higher threat. As players venture into the city, they find that it too has been ransacked and overrun by a new, humanoid enemy. Players must rid the streets of monsters, take back the governor's mansion, and save Felicity's mother. My work on Level 2 actually began during winter break, before reconvening with my team. I had begun whiteboxing out Level 2 to be a series of underground subway, maintenance, and sewer tunnels. The idea was to have it be a transition level that introduced players to the snake enemy. The original plan was to have 4 enemy types: bipedal, snake, siren, and avian. However, due to scope issues, and difficulties in the programming department with the bipedal AI, the decision was made to have the snakes occupy Level 1, the underground level be cut, and to jump straight to the final level. In the planning of San Juan, I put myself more into the shoes of the player, and designed around what would be a fun place to fight. With lots of Level 1 playtesting feedback taken into consideration, it was an easy decision to make Level 2 into a redemption level of sorts. I was finally able to pull out the terrain tools to create a coastline, distant islands, and sloped streets. To better help my fellow designers in Unreal Engine's pre-world composition iteration, I traced our level map to create a BSP foundation and split it into 3 sublevels. Sublevels were classified as zones and assigned to an LD to take from whitebox to set dressing. I got a jump start on the first zone, whiteboxing the coastline, city walls, entryway, main street, and all surrounding buildings. I then handed off Level 1 and took full control of building Level 2 from the ground up. Once all LDs had reached the set dressing stage, I went through all zones and painted debris, added or made certain props movable, and did a final lighting and grading pass. Across the board, I created all pre-production maps, pace diagrams, voice actor scripts, level events, cinematics, environmental sound effects, and the dialogue system. With players having fully grasped the mechanics at this point, it was important that I design the area to force their use. After all, what's the point in having a double jump if you never need to reach a rooftop, or the ground just isn't a threat? In playtesting, I found that an increase in difficulty had direct correlation with how often people use their abilities, whether passive or active, as opposed to the previously effective stand still and kick it till it dies strategy. There was an especially large spike in the use of the cloud charm, which meant if difficulty was to rise, playable space had to rise with it. Floating objects allowed players to temporarily escape danger, at least until the objects come plummeting back down. Joining rooftops was also a logical choice to break up possible monotony in encounters. In Level 2, the primary enemy is the bipedal. While the bipedal do suffer from AI and animation bugs, they are intended to act as slower but more brutal adversaries. The bipedal has an arm slash attack at close range, and a leap attack that ends in area of effect slam, similar to the Cataclysm ability. While their abilities are high damage, they also have much longer attack buffers. Like all enemies, the bipedals have 3 tiers, in which their health, size, and damage is increased. As you fight through the Governor's Mansion, you will find that the bipedals are a very aggressive type of harm, prone to alpha culture. While Level 2 poses a much greater challenge, the targeted skill level players of Charmed is still for those who are familiar with games and have played a handful of casual combat-oriented games, but are by no means required to be hardcore gamers. The target age range is about 8 to 14 years. Charmed was intended to be a low-stress fantasy beat-em-up, but in testing, it proved that the theming caused heightened tension, and the hoarding tendency of the bipedal enemy made the experience stressful for some players. From the beginning, the mission was to deliver a power fantasy. However, my spin on it was more of a dark, grounded, and challenging fantastical experience. The goal was more empowerment through fantastical trials. It was critical to me that I deliver a real, memorable story backed by relatable emotions, especially for the target demographic. Contrasting the gameplay spaces so heavily, while keeping one grounded in a real-life location, really helped sell the warped kind of reality I was looking to portray. Being someone who is huge on details, one of my favorite late additions to San Juan is the famous Umbrella Street. While in pre-production on the level, I did extensive research into the culture of Old San Juan and Puerto Rico as a whole, even down to the indigenous birds, so I wouldn't accidentally have the wrong ambient sounds for the location. Did you know there's no seagulls in Puerto Rico? There's laughing gulls, which have a different sound and honestly just sound like a superior seagull. But I digress. San Juan is full of such rich culture and community, and with one of my good friends and the voice of Felicity being Puerto Rican, it was very important for me to enable the environment and actors to tell that story. San Juan's aesthetics are meant to be colorful, less hazy and lively. Bringing this type of character to the space helps make the empty streets and tolling of the convent bells that much more ominous. I also utilize decals to aid in passive environmental storytelling, whether it be brightening an otherwise dull garden wall with flower graffiti, or implying there was a David and Goliath interaction between two bipedal enemies that went horribly wrong. Another element of aesthetics that I began to realize I was undervaluing was background music. To attempt to remedy this, I implemented a larger variety of more high-energy combat music to really set the tone and make the more challenging fights feel more exhilarating. Despite AI and dialogue bugs due to some time constraints, I'm happy to call the redemption level a success.